And it looks like we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cause Talk Live. Today's stream, we're going to be talking about contest judging experiences, the good, the bad, and the not so ugly. And we're going to just kind of give you guys like a round about. I think all of us have had a lot of questions on like how do you learn to judge, how do you start judging, what do you have to like be mindful of, and so we're just going to start tossing that out there because I've had enough messages to Cause Talk Live about this. So we'll go ahead and start with introductions. I'm Thermo Cosplay. I've been cosplaying since 2014. And just a reminder, Cause Talk Live is sponsored by Age of Radio. Shout out to Age of Radio. And go ahead and I don't know what side you're on, Chibi, but
Hi, I'm GB Raincloud. I'm from the Seattle area. My cosplay judging experience started 2018, 2019, I believe, for a small convention in my area called JamAF. And then I actually moved on to international almost immediately, working for Pentacon, which I still work for and do some cosplay coordinating. So not only have I been a judge, but I've kind of helped with the background with like helping find other judges, helping set up criteria, helping set up the plans behind the judging. So I have quite a wide arrangement. I've also worked with these awesome kids with like UwuCon and other and fun events. So I've kind of done a little bit all over the place. I compete as well because I think a well-rounded judge is going to have some competition like under their belt so they know what they're doing. And I've been competing since probably 2013-ish, on and off for smaller conventions all the way up towards SakuraCon, which is a larger one in my area. So I have a little bit of experience. My biggest thing is probably, I'd say, like drama skits, that kind of stuff, but I have been breaking into actual craftsmanship builds, and my last was a first place in Journeyman at Anime. It's a new convention in our area. I want to say Anime Washington, which was in January here in our area. I won first place in Journeyman in my Deuce Star Center outfit.
Congrats. Hi, my name is Amber Bright. I'm a professional prop maker here in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been cosplaying for a while. Sam can tell you it's 1+ whatever hers is.
11
but
years.
I've judged.
11 and a half years for you. 11 and a half.
11 and a half years. I have judged everything from small library conventions all the way up to larger Wizard World events, LA Comic-Con. I got to judge for WonderCon and San Diego Comic-Con. So I have judged the whole breadth of small to large. I have competed in almost all of those except San Diego Comic-Con because I only got to go that one time. And I love, like Chibi was saying, I love to make sure that I compete every so often just to remind myself of what it's like to be on the other side of the table, because it is important that as a judge, and I'm sure we'll get to this, you know what they're going through as well. So I'm more on the craftsmanship side. I don't usually do the skits because I am an awkward bean, but we're coming at it from both sides.
And so we've kind of done our introductions. They've talked about their judging experience. I started judging, I think, in 2018, helping out with really small events, helping out with libraries. And then I did have an international, I've judged at PintyCon, so I've had international judging experience. And I've judged Fan Fusion. I've judged Game On Expo. I've judged St. Louis Online Cosplay Con. I've done a couple like online judging through Instructables as well, so I've kind of been all over as well. So both in person and online experiences. And I will say, if you're ever judging online, it is a lot trickier.
But scenes, which is my favorite thing.
Yeah, but outside of judging, I've also volunteered. I've helped on the back end coordinate and organize contests. I've helped ensure that like I've worked with conventions to strengthen their privacy rules because of privacy laws, and TBs even can attest to there are some events that have inadvertently shared out private data, and they're currently facing repercussions for that all over the U.S. Like multiple states are experiencing this, and it's just because those kind of rules weren't in place, and a lot of the volunteers that you see, a lot of the people that you see at conventions running contests or coordinating them are volunteers, so they may not be aware of privacy rules, and they may not be well aware of like business principles either. And so that's why we're having this conversation today. We're talking a little bit about like, you know, if you are thrust into the seat of judging, the one thing we want you to understand is that you have authority and power over others. And so as Spider-Man Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. So we want to make sure that, you know, people are aware of the how good it can be, but also aware of how stressful it can be, so that you're prepared, and the privilege that's being thrust upon you is something that you're going to be able to manage.
And I think it's
There's
important
some
that people understand why. Like, one of the things that caught me off guard as a judge is I'd make my decision and then people would come over and be like, well, why not this person? Why not this person? That caught me off guard the first time. So as a judge, you also need to be prepared to speak as to why certain people won without tearing down somebody else. Be like, oh, well, no, that Spider-Man, his scenes are trash, but like the Iron Man, like that was all good.
Well,
So
and on top of that too, I've had instances twice now where after judging, someone came up to me and took me aside privately and said, hey, by the way, that person already placed at another convention. And then you have to go speak to representatives of the convention and have a code of conduct discussion and determine, well, are we going to let this one stand and then just not permit them to compete in the future? Or are we going to give this to the runner-up that we had planned already? And we'll go over the rules too of competing just briefly at the end, because some people don't understand that once you've competed at all the levels and you've placed at all the levels in one costume, you can't ever compete again unless you win a sandbag. But there's more details. We'll focus on judging.
Yeah,
first.
sandbagging is a really complicated topic that could
Very
probably be
complicated.
discussed
We're going to focus on
because
judging first.
it
Yeah, no,
matters
go
on
ahead,
like the size of the convention, who the coordinators are, how many wins, and
Yep.
what kind of wins that costume have had. As somebody who recently got asked, was I sandbagging because I have competed twice and placed twice in one of my costumes, I had to explain to them that the first convention that I placed in was a very small convention. I think there was only 12 competitors. I was the only master level basically there. And I didn't even compete in masters. I was still a journeyman, so I was competing in journeyman, but I had won best in show. But that's because I just happened to be the only one there who had the cosplay experience behind them. So I got placed there. I reached out to the second convention I competed at, Anime Washington. I explained to them the situation. Hey, yes, I won best in show in this event, which is technically a master win, but I was the only one. There was only one other person that was at my level, so there was no competition. It felt very much like a gimme award, and I don't feel comfortable competing in masters because I'm not a masters competitor. And the con was really, really cool about it. We had a great discussion, and they allowed me to enter journeyman again with what I showed them and what I fixed on my piece. So it is a very complicated subject. Don't be scared if you've competed in multiple costumes. Just be aware that you need to be speaking openly with your coordinator about what has happened with that piece.
Yeah, and typically those coordinators do reach out to the judges, because that happened to me twice at two different cons where the coordinator reached out to me and said, hey, we got this really weird situation. What do you think? And I had to go, oh, well, they placed at this con last year in that level. They need to level up. And if they're not willing to level up, then they can't compete in that costume because they placed in that level. But if like, you're right, there's a scale effect. And so judges get consulted for that too. So just be aware that you might have a coordinator reach out to you and ask questions that may be unexpected. So we're actually kind of already in the discussion of like, you know, what to expect in a contest. So expect to have frequent communication from the coordinator. Expect, like Amber said, to have questions, and like Chibi said, expect to probably have some of the leaders in the event reach out to you as a judge and say, hey, what's the ethical guideline for this situation? Or hey, what in your experience, what would you say? Was this a national competition? Was it a regional competition? Was it international? Because all those levels can affect things. And the judges end up being what's called a subject matter expert for a lot of these events. So just be mindful of that. And I will say, if you're going to an event, if you have a really good contest organizer, they are going to communicate with you frequently. A lot of contests that, even if they're new, I've been in a contest before where it was like the first or second time they'd ever run it. And they gave me a list. They said, here's our code of conduct for the convention. Please familiarize yourself with it. And then here are the list of criteria that we expect you to judge on. And here are the number of individuals competing. And that means that there's somebody who's in order. They're going to have breaks, set into things. They're going to be very strict with timing. Good conventions will cut you off in the middle of judging because they want to make sure that the timing is equitable across everyone. That's a really good coordinator. It sucks as a judge because you're like, bye.
Yeah.
But you're just going to have to swallow that and move on. Yeah, it sucks. It really does. But you have to swallow it, move on. And it sucks when you're a contestant too. You're like, but I have this much more to say, and you're like, but you can't. I'm sorry. So good conventions will make you feel uncomfortable sometimes just to make sure it's equitable.
As an example, and no matter what, I always tell this to my judges as a coordinator, it is so important that we allow the same amount of time for every single cosplayer, whether they are a novice or they are a master. I have unfortunately been in situations where small conventions were not handling their time. They were not timing people. So the novices, which almost always get judged first, ended up with like anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes with the judges. But they ran out of time because they weren't actually timing people. So by the time the journeyman and the masters were up, we had less than 3 minutes to speak with the judges. It messes up the flow of traffic, basically, in a sense. It makes it where the people, like, yes, a novice might have 5 minutes to talk about their costume, but they're going to have much more basic needs than a master. Like, when I talk about Deuce, 5 minutes, I can barely speak about every single technique, and I rely very heavily on my build book because I cannot talk about everything that goes into that costume in 5 minutes. So it is very important that judges are aware. And if you go into a situation, a convention where you see that there is no timer, ask for a volunteer or set a timer up on your own phone. Like, make sure that you have a conversation with the coordinator about how important that is. Costume contests are getting so much more popular. I know KCC this weekend ended up having 30 competitors. That's the biggest they've ever had, and it overwhelmed the coordinator. So like they did fantastic. The show was great. I watched it online because I wanted to be there, but it shows that it's very popular now, and it's more important than ever to keep that timeline and make sure everybody gets the right amount of time.
Well, and what a lot of if you're a judge and you find like it's a contest coordinator isn't doing what you expect, you can. It is your prerogative to go, well, according to the guideline I received, this is how much time they, like Chibi said, set it up on your own phone. Because I've done that before where there was an emergency situation. 2 of the coordinators for an event never showed up. And so there was one person doing everything by themselves and they weren't supposed to. And so I said, okay, well, I've got a phone and I've got a timer. So yeah. So, and Amber and I have done this before too. Like UbuCon's a very small con. And so one of the judges and myself, just in case I got called away, well, because I was helping coordinate, I was helping like document everything, just in case I got called away. I'm pretty sure it was you, Amber. You had the timer on your phone, and it would be just in case. Yeah.
Yeah, because one of my worst convention experiences was a convention that we had 90 contestants, and they booked 2 hours for prejudging. Tell me how I'm supposed to get.
Did you get to see anything in advance?
In 2 hours. No. Yeah, no, I had to.
That would be an example of a bad contest organized, bad, poorly organized contest. Not bad, just poorly organized. Yeah. And it happens sometimes. There are moments. Now, I will say I'm a lot more critical of conventions where their contests are poorly organized if they've been around for more than 5 years. Because you've been around for more than 5 years, you have no excuse other than the fact that you're probably not training your staff properly. Yeah. And that's another thing to remember. Yeah. And remember, when you're a judge, you are contracted to perform a job role. Yeah. Yes, it's a privilege. It is not an entitlement. It is a privilege. And again, you have authority and power over others. So please remind yourself of like, if I was in this situation, what would I expect and how would I feel and how do I want to be treated? So just be very mindful.
And I think people who've never judged before have this like idea in their head that the judges are just like lounging back with like a fan and stuff like that going, pass. But as a judge, if you are a good judge, you are on your feet, you are touching every part of that costume, you are flipping seams, you are looking at every side of it, because the costume can look so perfect from one angle. But if you flip it, you're going to start seeing, oh, this is all hot glue.
Yeah, because I've had,
simpler and cleaner. So like as a judge, if you're sitting behind your table and you're not hands-on, you are not doing it right. You
Well,
are
and
not
that's wherein like I've judged with the members who had a physical inability to look things up. So we put their chair in a position where the person could stand in front of them, and then we would show elements to them because they needed to walk with crutches and there was no way that they could do this. And so there are accommodations that can be made for judges as well. So say you have an injury, or say you have a hidden disability, or say you have a combination that's needed, that can absolutely be requested. Like, I'm epileptic. I have to remind conventions over and over and over again not to use strobe lights. It's not doing so well, so I'm not going to be judging ever again. Like, in at least not in Arizona, because I've had too many instances now with strobe lights that I feel like it makes me feel uncomfortable as a judge that I have to look away from the stage, because then if the contestant does see me in the crowd looking away from the stage, they're going to feel hurt that I'm not looking at them, but it's because there's strobe lights. So conventions also need to be more mindful of who they hire as judges, and they should be asking these questions to make sure that, hey, are you safe and are you going to be okay? So your safety as a judge is just as important as the safety of the contestant. Don't forget that.
If a judge can't get up, a really important task is looking through the bill book, looking through the pictures. If somebody's having a bill book, if they have a digital one, having that judge be the one to check over those kinds of things is very helpful. Because, like, when you're up walking around, touching, flipping seams, being there with the cosplayer, it's very hard to also give time to the digital format that they're showing you. So that's always a really good way to do it. And I want to put a caveat here. Judges are for hire 99% of the time. We come in because a convention or a coordinator has asked for our specialties to come and help with the show. We are not in charge of the show usually. We do not do any of the background work. We are there to meet the cosplayers, to see what they have, to look through build books. We are working when the convention opens to when it closes usually. We do not have time in between to like look through build books after the event. And a lot of times we're not in charge of the aftermath of the event either. So, example, if something happens, or if you're not okay with a judge, or maybe you have beef with the judge, like, they're for hire. You need to be speaking with the coordinator. If there's something that you see that's kind of fishy, don't go to a judge, go to your coordinator. If you have a question about something in the event, go to your coordinator. They're the ones in charge of the background stuff. The judges are kind of just the faces to be there. I don't know how many times my friends have come to me with uncomfortable stories going, oh, this one time I judged, these people were like blaming me for picking this particular character as a winner, but they weren't there in the room. They didn't see how pretty the costume was, but they were practically harassing me because I was one of the judges. And I'm like, that is never okay behavior.
Yeah, and that's one thing of the bad of contests judging is sometimes you get very volatile members who, if they don't place, or say you have someone that brings in a whole crowd of people that's super supportive of them and they're angry that their friend or their family member or their loved one didn't place, that is a risk you assume when you become a judge, but it's not acceptable. It's just a risk you assume, and then you'll need to escalate.
I have a cosplay judging horror story where I judged a pretty big convention, and there was a large group that all had like done a lot of sewing and stuff like that. They were really good. They didn't end up placing because there were others that were better. And later that night, I was at Denny's, actually sitting eating with my husband, and I hear behind me that same group bitching about how we had been playing favorites or something like that. So my little self got right up and went over to the booth and was like, hi, I'm one of your judges. Can I answer any questions for you today about why we chose who we chose? And like, they all went like white as a sheet, but like, I was like, the audience doesn't see what the judges see. And
exactly.
I see a comment in YouTube that the prize should be determined by audience decision. And I think that's fine for like skits and stuff like that. But if you are a craftsmanship contest, the audience can't see the craftsmanship from where they are. So as a
you
judge,
don't see how good those seams are. You don't see how hidden any blemishes are. Like, my partner does usually very simple pieces, but they're done so perfectly that she places in masters every time. Because a lot of times when you're in masters, it's about how perfectly conducted that piece is, not by how flashy it is.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I mean, there's one thing I do want to mention too. We've talked about flipping seams and stuff like that. As a judge, you do need to get consent. If they do not consent to you touching their costume or flipping flipping their seams, you cannot touch it.
Oh yeah.
It is all
I'm always
about
like, may
consent.
I
So
touch?
yes,
May I
and
get
if
in
they say
here?
no, then that is where you're going to rely exclusively on the build book and then just ask them questions because there are some people that feel uncomfortable with physical touch, and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
perfectly
In
fine.
that case, I just ask them, I'm like, can you flip over like
Mhm.
this part? Can you show me this part, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, absolutely. Before you're just like getting up in there, definitely like make sure that's part of your like behavior, like, may I touch or will you show me? So
And earlier, sorry, just to drop off before I forget. If you have a question, if you would like to get feedback from the judges, that's also a
Mhm.
coordinator question. I mean, if the judges are sitting at their table, so let's say they're guests to the convention and they're sitting at their table after the event, most judges are totally fine having a discussion with you after the event. But if they are not tabling at the event, you can just go ask your coordinator, and then the coordinator will get in contact with the judges. You should never be reaching out to your judges ever for any reason outside of the event, because
Right.
that is their job. They're there for the event, and that is it.
yeah.
And
And
if you
please
have a
don't
if you have a
like
core
run up after the event and be like, why didn't I place? Because I guarantee at that point the judges have been working for like 6 to 8 hours and are just frazzled. And I
Yeah.
had one girl who ran up to me and I'd been like judging for 10 hours at that point. She's like, what can I do better? And I was just like, talk to me tomorrow. I
That's a
need
good
to
thing.
go eat.
Remember, your
I'm about
judges
to
are
pass out.
human. Most of us are. It's
Mhm.
8 to 10 hour day when we're judging.
Yep.
We're human. Off and on. Like I had an experience, Fan Fusion earlier this year. Unfortunately, the ink had bled on our awards winners list, so it cut out part of the name, and I couldn't tell what it was. And also the this person had changed their name in between, so the old name was there and not the newest one. So I announced them to the best of my ability, but I just pronounced it instead of zoo, looked like Zhu, and so I just slightly messed up the pronunciation of it. And the person afterwards was very upset, and that's absolutely okay. That's fine. But I mean, I've been a judge many times, and I've had people message me really inappropriate remarks, and those are things that you do escalate to a coordinator. And if for some reason the coordinator responds back to you inappropriately, which I've had before too, a few conventions have had individuals who were, I don't know if they're just newer or they were unfamiliar with enterprise concepts, but they responded inappropriately in return, and you can continue to escalate from there. But just understand that, like Amber and Chibi have said, our judges have worked all day long. They're tired. We're more than happy to usually provide
Oh, yeah.
feedback, but we need a break.
Yeah, I am more than happy. Like, if you ever have me as a judge, the next day, if you want to come over and talk about your costume, I will remember your costume, I promise. And I'm more than happy to be like, oh, I liked this. I liked this. Think about this. Think about this. Like, I love talking about people's costumes, just not when I'm crashing and have worked for
Yeah, and
8
again,
hours and it's
to
2 a.m. and I'm just like,
the
please let me
risk of judging is you get really great experience, you get to learn amazing things
go.
from people, so that's like a good learning experience. The bad risk is you will be criticized, and
Mhm.
it is your responsibility, even if you don't like those criticisms, to escalate to a coordination and leave it alone. People are allowed to be upset. Some people don't take it well. Some people just get really frustrated, and sometimes it's they're just venting. And since, like Chibi said, you are being contracted to perform a job per the principles of business ethics, you need to take on that criticism, review, and see if maybe there is something as a judge you can do better, because criticism is the highest form of flattery. It means someone thinks you can do better. And the reason they're saying something is because they think that maybe it can improve. And if you take that and you make the improvements, you could become an amazing judge, and the convention could be an amazing convention. And it's those events that are really good that take that criticism and really find the root of it and grow.
Yeah.
And as judges, you have to do the same thing, and it sucks sometimes, but you have to do the same thing.
And don't be
As me and
afraid to
Amber said,
learn.
we constantly are competing every once in a while, if nothing else, just so we know what people are going through, so we can become better judges by knowing the experience. And honestly, it's funny because in one of my, God, it would have been like my third time I ever judged. I judged with AK Weeru, and I was so nervous. And
jealous.
yeah, I love him to death. Now he's one of my really good friends, but like I was so nervous because that was like the first time I'd ever worked with him. But I got some of the best criticism of being a judge after judging with him, because after everything, as a judge, I'm like, Weeru, do you have any advice for me as a young judge? So going to events and working with other cosplayers that are usually above my level is one of my favorite things ever, because not only am I learning from contestants and like hearing the techniques they're using, I'm also around amazing, incredible people that have super cool stuff that I can ask questions to. So some of my best like judging advice I had was because I was like,
yeah.
I know I was the judge, but can you give me feedback?
Yeah, I like conventions that take novices who have placed twice in a novice and bring them in as a judge, because you're bringing them early. Think of it as like an interning to become a judge, right? So you're giving them an experience, but also there, when you've been competing for so long, it's judging for so long, there are unconscious biases that you internally have to face and be introspective about. Bringing in that fresh face and that person saying, "Hey, why don't we look at it this way?" You're like, "Oh, that's a great idea. Let's look at it this way." And then in turn, like Chibi said, we can offer insight to others and say, "Hey, this is what you should expect in the future. These are the risks. These are like the rewards. This is what you can look forward to." And it's a really good roundabout discussion, right? It avoids what's called confirmation bias, where you're confirming, or confirmation and conformity biases, where you're confirming your own ideas over and over and over again with like-minded people. And so you're conforming to those ideals. Instead, you want to break your ideals over and over and over again to make sure you're being equitable, ethical, and kind to everyone.
And it's interesting to see like how things, like how the culture of competing kind of evolves too. I remember when I first started competing, like the prevailing culture was sewing builds never win, foam builds always win. And then a couple of years ago, like the discourse is sewing builds always win. No one likes armor anymore. So it's interesting to watch what is considered the implicit bias of like the judging culture at the time. And I don't know how accurate that is. I've placed both sewing and foam.
I've placed just because my makeup was amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Like, so like it's good to always like remember that this is a team job. It is you and 1 to 3 other people.
That gets us into our rules of judging. That's actually, I have in here, and rule number 6 of judging: always have an odd number of judges. If you walk into a judging room and there's an even number of judges, you're going to be at a deficit, because if you all agree, or if you have half and half, 2 agree and 2 agree, you want to have an odd number of judges, so you always have that one deciding factor.
Yeah. Because you will get landlocked. Like, yeah. I have been at so many costumes where we have like 2 people and we're like, okay, but first here, first here, first here, first here. And each judge has like a different perspective on it. So you need to be willing to talk and to listen and to like agree with someone else's like experience. Like if I have someone who's a great seamstress and she tells me, yeah, this was really well done, and I'm looking at like the armor going, yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, you want to rely on each person's, like, I'm a Jill of all trades, but I primarily specialize, like, I know a lot about electronics because I work in information tech, and I know a lot about special effects because I've had to experiment so much due to my allergies. And so those are my specialty areas, but I know a little bit about everything else because I've done everything else. However, if someone is a master seamstress, makes clothing for a living, I'm going to rly on them much more than myself. Like my experience is more leather and stretch fabric. So I'm still getting into non-stretch fabric, and that is a whole other world. Like, I'm astounded at just how complicated that can be.
Yeah, one of my favorite conventions is LA Comic-Con, because Chrissy, the coordinator, always has a list of, this is my sewing judge, this is my prop judge, this is my SFX judge, and she slots people into
That's what Tucson does a lot too. Like Tucson Comic-Con, UwuCon, they work really hard at making sure each person has like a big specialty, but they also have a little bit of knowledge of everything else.
Yeah, because Penti is like, our rules at Pentacon are a foam, a wig, a sewing. We don't have like first place, second place, third place, because we're too small of an area. And so we spend a lot of energy and time searching for judges that have a really like diverse, here's our foam judge, here's a sewing judge, because we do want to make sure we have all perspectives. So we have a good board of judges where it doesn't just become one bias, like, oh, well, they're all armor judges, so they know more about armor, so therefore the armor will have an advantage. Like, we want to make sure it's a very even playing field.
I
So
have
let's go
been
ahead
the
and
only judge at a convention before, and I did not like it. Like,
that was at a library. Like, the only time I was like, "Oh, was the only judge at a convention was a library." But the crazy thing is in Arizona, I don't know if this is the same thing in other states, but in Arizona, our library cons, we easily see 50 to 60 people
Mhm.
show up for those contests, and I was standing there going,
Mhm.
that's where
I
you
think it's
talk to
getting
the
more
coordinator.
popular now. Like in the
Yeah.
Pacific, like smaller events are starting to. Because the one thing I've noticed the difference between our events is you guys have like a lot of pop ups and small events. Ours were like we have like 4 big events a year, and like that's our 4 big events. Finally, we're starting to see new events popping up and like smaller events popping up, and they are starting to get some popularity. Like I'm debating next weekend if I want to go to a contest because there's a new Japanese fair that popped up and they're having a cosplay contest put on by SoccerCon. And I'm
And
like,
I like that because not
do I want
everybody
to do
can afford to go to conventions,
Yeah.
right? Not everyone can afford to go to conventions. Not everyone
Mhm.
can afford to meet the craftsmanship requirements for some conventions or afford to meet the skit requirements for some conventions. Because some conventions, they don't care if you make your own costume, but you have to have this amazing skit with these incredible backgrounds. And that's still a lot of work, right? And so having these smaller events is like it's like when you're learning to become any kind of job. You start at level 1 and you get training up. And I like that they're beginning to build this into the pop culture communities so that people can really put their foot in and see, am I ready for something like this?
I do want to remind a lot of people, though, that every event is vastly different from the next event. Do not
Yeah.
assume all contests are cut and paste. The
Yeah.
only time you'll see a cut and paste like board of strategies or beliefs or rules is going to be World Cosplay Summit, the ECCC qualifiers, the like those kind of events are a worldwide event. Therefore, there are standardized rules that every single event that has to abide to. Other than that, it's free for all for any event. And
Yeah.
99.9% out of the times I've competed, events like Comic Cons are vastly different than anime conventions with the ruling, with the judging types, and everything in between. So if you are new and interested in judging or even interested in starting to do cosplay competitions, starting at small events are really nice because they're usually very chill. They're very like more kind of homegrown. Like you'll know all the people there in the back room. You'll be able to spend your time with the judge and have a little more conversation rather than you have 5 minutes with the judges. You have to know your shit now. Good luck. Like,
Yep.
And
So
I
here
think
we're going to go through the 10 rules of contest judging. And these rules are established from just there's a lot of forums on like different cosplay judges that have been talking about a standardized list of rules to avoid complicit and implicit bias. And we'll cover those biases a little bit later in this because most people don't know what that means. So number 1, the biggest thing you'll want to remember is do not discriminate based on economic standing. So one person may come in with elaborate really nice silks and incredibly expensive fabrics, and another person has the same exact character, right? But they used thrifted fabrics. Do not base your judging off of the type of fabrics. By doing that, you are breaking down the socioeconomic level of someone. They may have the
my
same
deuce is
incredible
all
skill
linen.
types. Right. They may have
Like
the same
it's one of my
incredible
biggest
skill types,
costumes. The one
but
I've won the most awards in. It is literally mostly linen and poly because I was
Mhm.
cheap and it's expensive. Like I had to buy like $30 worth of vinyl for that stupid costume. So I'm like, the rest of the fabric's got to be cheap because the vinyl's what I'm going to splurge a lot on. So
well,
like,
the only time you're going to
you
want to look at
absolutely can
materials.
compete in thrifted shit.
Well, absolutely. And the only time you want to look at materials is if you're noticing like excessive staining, like it wasn't treated properly. It's got a lot of tears, like they didn't know how to seal it, or maybe it's a foam armor and they used really, really old foam and you're seeing it crack and melt everywhere. And now it's a concern of are they going to be exposed to elements in this foam that they shouldn't be, like chemicals and stuff? Those are the only times. And I've had individuals tell me, well, I put spray or sorry, a hairspray on my face to seal my makeup. And that is something that does concern us because that makes you more flammable. And then there's also moments where people have used glues. Like I met someone that used Gorilla Glue to build up a makeup, and I said, please, after this, go to urgent care because they'd never done it before. And I'm like, I don't know if you're going to be able to get that off.
Yeah.
Because they'd misunderstood. They thought people had used Gorilla Glue, not Elmer's glue. And so there are moments where mistakes are happening, and that's the only time you'd want to consider looking at the materials. And it's more from a safety perspective, not from socioeconomic, making sure that person's safe is going to be okay.
And I think it's
Another
as
thing,
much about how they use the materials as like, or more about how you use the materials. Like for instance, when you have pink insulation foam props, they're very lightweight and they're very fragile. So maybe using those for like your breastplate and stuff like that, not a good idea. But like a big sword or something like that, a prop that you need to carry around.
But you could create some kind of new method of making it reinforced, like using fiberglass or something else. If you're creative, cool, but just be aware, like Amber said, there are some instances where high friction areas, you want to have really durable materials. But it doesn't matter how much that material costs you. It shouldn't, at least.
I've seen pink insulation foam that is finished with wood glue look just as good as pink insulation foam finished with XTC 3D, which is a high level
I hate
self-leveling
XTC.
resin.
I've used it so many times. I get tired of it. It bubbles in Arizona. It has this bubble problem.
There's a specific way you have to use it to be successful, whereas wood glue, you just slop it on a couple layers and go. So like,
yeah,
I don't know how many times I've been taught something new by a novice because they're like, well, I didn't know what to use for this, so I tried this. And you're like, oh, well, that's actually really genius. Like, this one person did this really cool FX makeup, and it was like I don't know who the character was. It was a long time ago, but they had like volcano makeup, and so they actually mixed coffee grounds in with some of the latex because it was food safe, and it made this like charcoal effect on their body. And I was like, you smell great, and it looks amazing. So, but like these are the things where it's just like, you can use some incredible materials to make some really cool things, but just for cheap.
Number 2 is do not discriminate. This is in the US, this is federally protected. So do not discriminate against a person's national origin, their race, their color, their religion, their disability, their sex, or any other form of familial status. If you do discriminate against this, or if you have a judge or a member of the coordination team retaliate against you for something that you were trying to get help with, you do actually have legal recourse there. It's very rare, but more and more online, this is where I see this. I see individuals who are very brazen and they're judging, and they'll mention, well, that person's not Black. Who cares? Do not judge based on someone's race. Do not judge based on their size. And we'll get more into other biases later, but those are federally protected, so don't do it. And in general, those seem to be rules that most other countries also tend to abide by.
Don't judge somebody by eye color or face shape. Like, none of that should ever be part of the judging criteria. It's based solely on the techniques brought that day.
Some people can't wear contacts, so they wear really cool like colored glasses, or they'll do makeup to try and emulate it. Just understand everyone's body is different, and therefore you should not be judging their body. You should be judging the outfit itself.
I never penalize somebody for having the wrong eye color, because I would rather them not wear contacts if they have not gotten the correct contacts for their eyes. Like, I would rather them just forego the contacts than get some $15 Halloween costume contacts and ruin their eyesight. So please, if you do not have the correct contact prescription from a reputable manager or manufacturer, like, just don't wear contacts. Like, just don't do it. It's a safety
issue. I'd say 50% of the time, my pictures with the cool eye color are actually digital art that I went in and like recolored my eyes, because I have an eye that has a hard time with contacts. So some days I'll wake up and I'm like, I just can't put a contact in today. And that's just what it is.
Yeah. And that's what happens. Then rule number 3, this is one that tends to ruffle a lot of feathers, but it's a part of most, if you could look at conventions code of conduct, it mentions bias, and they mention not to, and then additionally, when you're a judge, if it's a good well-organized contest, they will provide you with an additional code of conduct as a judge saying, please, we recommend that you follow these rules. But do not mention knowing any of the contestants. We're all a big community. We get it. But if you mention in the judging area, or you mention during announcing awards that you knew this person, it creates what's called an implicit bias. And then all of those attendees that are attending, right? Chibi mentioned people, and Amber, we have all mentioned, attendees get very passionate about protecting their members that they're cheering for, right? And if they hear that you've known this person, they're immediately going to assume that you only gave that award, like Amber mentioned, for favoritism or nepotism, because you knew that person. Whereas it could have been they had an amazing craftsmanship. So make sure that you only talk about the costume and not your relationship.
When I have somebody that comes in, and because I am very well connected in the cosplay community, especially here in Phoenix, I've judged like some of my best friends. When one of my best friends comes in, I kind of take a back seat on the judging. I look at my other judges. I go, this person is a best friend of mine. I've watched them build this.
I do the same thing. Yeah.
Kind of step back. And then I don't say anything, and I let the other judges look at them and kind of form their own opinion. And if I can give like specifics on the costume themselves, I will. But that's one of those things where you need, if that is a friend of yours, if that is someone you've known forever, like you need to tell your other judges and just kind of like bring yourself back a little
And
bit.
if you're the only judge and for some reason, if you're the only judge, it's a small contest, that's where I would bring in the coordinator or some of the other volunteers and get their feedback as well. People that I know have some kind of costuming experience, and I talk to the coordinator. I'd be like, hey, so I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible here, but I do know this person. I am looking exclusively at their costume, but I need to inform you of this for ethical purposes. And that
This is also important if you're a local like teacher or coordinator. If you sat in and helped somebody build something or worked with them to do something, you need to sit back and see, one, ask yourself, did they do anything outside of what you taught them to enhance the piece? And two, maybe just sit out of that one. As a local helper, I used to do a lot of workshops. If I ever ran into a cosplayer that I specifically sat and helped with, I would usually take a back burner. I'd be like, hey, this is the other judge's job. I am still here. And I mean, granted, you can also take that information, like usually if it's my friend that I'm judging, I will be even harder on them because I watched them con crunch that the night before. So I'll be like, what did you do to make this better than last night? Because I know what they did, but I try very hard to take a step back and solely focus on the cleanliness.
Yeah, there have been
it has
moments
nothing to
where
do with
I
our
stepped
relationship.
back from judging at all, like where there have been moments where someone's like, okay, hey, I need this help with this costume. What event are you competing at? And if they say it's the one I'm judging at, I'm so sorry, I can't help you, but here are 5 other people that could. Or if I haven't been invited as a judge yet, and then they reach out to me, I'm like, I'm so sorry, but I know these 5 people. I know what levels they're going to be in, and there's only 2 judges, so I can't be one of the people. Like, it's just, it's not going to be equitable.
You're going to be judged by someone you know, or you're going to judge someone you know. Like that's just
but you want to make sure you've got a wider panel. Like if you're going to go to an event where there's only 2, then that might be a problem.
And honestly, sometimes I love it when my friends rip me apart. Like it's a little bit more comfortable in my head hearing my friend be like, oh, well, I saw you do this and I would have done it this way. And this is done nicely. There are mean ways to say those words, but any chance I get to be judged by, like, let's say Weiru or Kinzumi or somebody that I like, I know these humans, I love them to death. I will gladly sit in that room and like let them talk to me about my costume, because for me, that's my greatest bit of growth. So like, I personally don't have an issue with it, but that's because we are all judges that believe in these standards and we follow these standards, and we're all very, very truthful with each other about things, and we don't judge each other as friends. We judge each other as this is the costume that you brought today, and here's what you need to work on, or here are the things that were incredible about it. Like,
and that kind of takes us into number 4, which is make sure that all conditions are equitable across all contestants, right? So we talked about timing. We talked about making sure they have the same, like say there's an emergency and the fire alarm gets pulled, that's happened, and you have to leave the room, and then all of a sudden, oh, well, we can let you judge, but you're going to judge on the street. No, because that's not the same condition that all the other people received. So you will need to wait, or you'll need to conduct yourself, say, well, is there another private space that we could take the remaining people to, because they deserve the same amount of equity as everyone else. So make sure that you
This is a big problem in Washington. I don't know how many times I've been judged in the same room as all the other contestants and how uncomfortable that makes me. And I know a lot of times coordinators, especially in smaller events, aren't allotted a separate space. Cosplay contests, for some reason, are still put on the back burner in Washington State. Like, they're just not thought of as an important event. So getting a room for separate judging is very hard. And I get that. Like, as somebody who's done coordination, I know it's really hard. But it's very important to try to find a quiet, safe space that people can be judged, where there are not other prying eyes.
And that's why you build in breaks in between. If it has to be in the same space, then only those people can be in that space. Like, or
exactly,
like, for instance,
time blocks are important.
Yes, One Fusion takes a huge ballroom that can fit 800 people. So we're on one side, and everyone else is that you can't hear anything. There are people laughing and giggling, but I still can't hear them. I can see their mouths moving, but I'm so far away that I have no idea what they're saying or doing.
I'm not going to call out the con, but the last con that I competed at, it was in the same room as the main stage was all the judging and stuff. And so I was one of the last people to be judged because I was in the master's category, and the judging was running late. So people were literally getting in and sitting down, and people were sitting close enough they could very easily watch the judging process and me being talked to. And as somebody who is comfortable in their judging and has done this a long time, I'm okay with it. But if somebody had gone in, if it was a novice who suddenly was now not only talking in front of these judges with this other group of people that they don't know. Like, that is not an okay situation to have put these people in. And
Well,
the
and that's the thing,
coordinator
like,
should have done more to find a private
right. That's
space.
what I was gonna say. The coordinator should do that, but if the coordinator doesn't, I feel it as a judge, it is our responsibility to speak up in moments when we see something like this and see if we can just find a quick separate space, even if it's not the most like even honestly, back alleys, all conventions typically have some form of a back alley or
A
something. Even we just
hallway,
take them to
a
the back alley, a
doorway.
hallway, just away from the people so that they're still treated in like a more private session. Then also number 5, make sure that all judges are using the same criteria.
Yeah.
There are some events where they just let judges and judge online, which is fine, but they don't give them the criteria. So everyone's judging off based something different. And then we get there the day of for final looks, and everyone's scores are all over the place. So make sure that the coordinator has given you criteria to judge off of. And if they haven't, reach out to them and say, what is the judging criteria? I want to ensure that I am remaining consistent with all the other judges.
Yeah, because some contests factor in your walk, your performance as well. Some that's equal. Some that's like 90% craftsmanship, 10% performance. Some it's just craftsmanship. And so like if you have one person who's giving equal weight to performance and craftsmanship and one judge who's only looking at craftsmanship, you're going to have different standards there.
Yep,
and it's
exactly.
going to be unfair.
Like,
So like
UbuCon's one of those events where they actually separate their judges. They have craftsman judges that watch the craftsman performers where they walk on or they do a small skit, and then they leave, and the performance judges come in and watch just the performance. So that there's some conventions that are beginning to do this. They're starting to separate it because they understand that there are just some people that have more knowledge in those areas, and creating that separation also kind of essentially creates like a halftime show where as the craftsmen are getting their awards set up, then the performance. And one thing I will say, this is a personal like well not, it's not personal. I so as a craftsman, based on definition and stuff like that, craftsman, you're going to look at the clothing itself, and most of the time if it is primarily craftsmanship contest, you're not really concerned about the performance. But in my opinion, and from from my experience, you should still have your judges in the room, and you should, as a judge, should still be sitting in the room even if you're not judging a performance, because I've been in rooms before where performance wasn't really an element for most of the contestants. It was only for a small number, and the costume has fallen apart on stage. Like they had safety pinned it in ways where I couldn't see it, right? And they got on stage and started moving, and the costume fell off or broke or things happened, and that's a part of craftsmanship. So making sure that it holds up the whole time.
I do have an example of that. Sometimes it just takes the walk-on to determine who wins the category. Because for me personally, one of the very first competitions I ever competed at, I was neck and neck for 3rd place with this one other cosplayer, but her walk-on was so just like, even today, I'm still like, I remember her walk-on because it was so good. And the judges chose her over me because her walk-on just had that little extra flair that just showed her character better than mine.
In my experience, walk-ons and craftsmen go together because there's not a skit expected. It's just supposed to be some kind of flair where you're.
But at least, it introduces the character in a more physical way if people don't know who the series is or who the character is. And if you can really show off your character during that process, as somebody who is like, I am very partial to like competitions that have a walk-on element. That's my favorite part to judge. It's very much like, yes, like I love it when people really add an extra spotlight to that character. And I understand not everybody can. It's not for everybody, but when they can, it just brings my little heart joy. And so I always tell people, just try it. It's scary, yes, but just try it.
Just try it. And it helps judges sometimes too. Like you mentioned, there might be a time where we're locked and we can't figure out, oh gosh, we've got these 3, they're all incredible, and that walk-on is the deciding factor. That personality, that they just, that little bit of flair. So that's kind of something that I recommend
I
as
always
a judge.
tell people that you as a cosplayer have 2 opportunities to convince the judges that you deserve the award. Once in your prejudging, what you tell them, what you say to them, get your work in their mind, and then the second is your walk-on. And I've seen really powerful, like, or really well done cosplays not make the same impact as a smaller, more simpler cosplay in which the person is on top of telling their techniques as well as like good personality on stage. Like you as the contestant need to convince the judges that you deserve that award, and you have two.
And then I'm going to get through the rest of these rules real fast, and then we'll keep having more discussions. But number 6, I already mentioned, have an odd number of judges so that you don't get landlocked. And then, or decision locked. Familiarize yourself with the convention's code of conduct. I mentioned that earlier. But just a reminder, number 7. Number 8 is do not discuss a contestant's scores when others are around. So you mentioned that people were walking into a room and you were being judged. That meant that there was officially it's sort of inequitable treatment there because there was no privacy in your judging experience. So make sure that if there is, times going over, something's going wrong, speak to the coordinator to find a space so that the individual isn't going to be exposed in a way that makes them uncomfortable. Number 9.
Another really quick comment. Sorry. This is also very important to me. We mentioned it in the very beginning, and I wanted to squeeze this in. It is also really, really, really important that the judges never use any legal information during any of that process, unless it's that number one check-in where it's like, may I have your legal name to make sure I have the correct person? That is the only time legal information needs to be passed. As somebody who unfortunately went to a convention where they announced my legal name twice on stage in front of the audience, I feel bad because I almost made the MC cry because I really gave it to her afterwards saying, why was this done? I was told on piece of paper and by word of mouth that my legal information would not be used because it cannot be used for various reasons. And the judges had no idea that they couldn't use their legal names. In fact, they didn't even have my stage name until later.
That's the thing. Judges have PII, personally identifiable information. So as a judge, if you notice someone's legal name, maybe go talk to the contestant and say, do you want me to announce this? Because I have family members that are under protection because of people that have harmed them. And so they cannot have their legal name exposed.
That's exactly it. Like, I was in a situation where there was an old bully of mine in that room. We probably would have never have noticed each other until our legal information got said. Like, there is no reason for any of that to be announced on stage. And what pissed me off was the fact that the document that I signed when I signed up for the competition literally said your legal information will not be used. This is for check-in only. And then it was still used. So like that was a lapse on the convention and the coordinator. And
that's a good
I just want to make that like very, very, very clear to anybody, including judges. Yeah. Please make sure you are safe.
If you're going to coordinate a contest, and that's one thing that I ended up getting in an argument about, but I had my name and everyone else's name sent out to me in an email, and I'm like, here's your judging time. And they sent everyone's judging time. I'm like, no, you should have just sent me my judging time. But they sent everyone's judging time. Some of the people had their legal names in there. Some of them and I'm thinking here, like, a lot of people create protections in their social media so that people don't know their legal name and they only know their stage name or their handle. And there are more more conventions that I'd like to mention in Arizona that have done this, and I've had to remind them there's AZ-HB 2154. There's an actual law, and there's also the Telecommunications Act, the Email Privacy Act. There are federal laws that without consent you cannot share my private information to anyone else. And if a judge or a coordinator contests this and retaliates against you, you have what's called a protection under the FTC for the FCRA. And that's essentially you are a consumer providing review. And if they've retaliated against you, you can submit a formal complaint to the FTC. And it is officially that convention's job to investigate, remediate, and ensure training is issued so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, because I was okay, and it sucks, but I was really hurt, but I was okay. But the woman next to me that I was competing with that I ended up befriending, she was a family with a couple of littles, and she tries very hard to keep her legal stuff safe because she has a family and she has a job that she doesn't want people to find her. And I was like, I that's what I told the MC. I'm like, my information was okay because the only thing that was bad was my bully was there. So like, keep in mind, there's also harassers, stalkers. Like the reason why a lot of us keep our information safe is because of bad people. But there are also people out there that might have job or work or families that they cannot have their legal information shared. So it is just so very important that you think about the other people's information and what you can do to protect them.
Yep. And then number 9, you'll want to dispose of all judging documentation immediately after awards are announced. There have been several times there's several times where I've seen build books next to the judging criteria, and like I've had to grab everything and then find the furthest trash can I could while ripping things apart and toss it away. This is why I like keeping stuff on my phone, because immediately after I can delete all record of everything and only keep the backup on the convention side. But it's no longer shared with my personal email account. It's all on the convention side. So if they want to provide feedback to whoever it is, they can take my comments and give it to them. But I prefer digital format. Not everybody's comfortable with that. That's fine. So if you have written paper, you shred that up and you find a really far away trash can and you toss it.
Yeah, that's a big thing for me because I remember one of the first costume contests I judged. And like when you're judging, you're just like writing shorthand and great paint job, poor seams, visible foam. Like these are things that like, yes, I would like if the cosplayer wants to know, I want to tell them, but I want to tell them in a way that doesn't feel hurtful. And I remember turning around looking and seeing one of those cosplayers that I had written like poor gluing or something, like not something major, but like something that like if I read it, I'd be like, oh wow, I suck at that. Like looking at the paper, and I was like, no, like please, like let me talk to you about it. Don't just read my shorthand because we're trying to get through 90 people. I'm jotting really quickly and I want you to learn and grow, but I don't want you to feel like you suck.
Yeah, and our final rule is pretty easy. Be kind to yourself. Like we said, you're putting yourself at risk by giving, you have power over others. And anytime you have power over others, there's going to be criticism involved with that, right? Anytime you're a coordinator or a judge, you're performing a job role. And therefore, consumers are going to criticize you, just like they criticize businesses. And that's okay. But understand that if they're saying something hurtful physically about you or things that are really unfair, that's where we mentioned doing the escalation process. But there are moments where sometimes that criticism is just a learning moment for you as a judge. And you need to go, maybe I wasn't mindful with my words, or like Amber mentioned, maybe I need to be more careful. Maybe I need a clipboard to hide what I'm writing. Yep. And you just have to be more mindful and aware because people are naturally curious and they will do goofy things sometimes. And so you kind of have to protect yourself
in my hand always now because of that.
Yeah, but be kind to yourself. Sometimes you'll mispronounce things because there are some characters whose names are just like, what? And there's some
or they're from a different culture that you don't know how to pronounce the word from.
Yeah, there's some social handles where I'm like, can I have the onomatopoeia here? Because I have no idea what what is this? So it's okay. Be kind to yourself. If someone has a concern afterwards, talk to them, apologize, say, hey, in the future, can you explain to me? And then also, like, one thing I'm starting to do as a judge, like, again, when I judge in different locations, I've just had some poor experiences recently and I'm not up for it. But that's the thing too, is if you have any sort of like emotional or mental distress in your life, judging will only add to it. So just be aware of that. Having someone, and if you do see that during judging, if you have the time and you look at their name and you're like, I have no idea how to say it, just ask, can you tell me real quick how to pronounce this, and then write it down underneath so that you have an idea. But overall, just be mindful. Then there's unconscious biases that every judge should be mindful of. Gender bias. Do not judge anyone based off their gender. If they, doesn't matter what character they're portraying. Don't judge anyone off of their age. Never judge them because they have an unusual name. Just ask how to pronounce it. Don't judge them because they're prettier than everyone else. Beauty bias is a really big problem in cosplay. So make sure you're looking exclusively at the costume itself and at the construction elements, or if it's performance, you're looking at the performance. Then there's also the halo effect. This one is something that's predominantly online. The halo effect is essentially, it leads people to inadvertently put others on pedestals, and then we keep pushing them on that pedestal, and unfortunately this leads to entitlement, where that's why you get some of these people who have competed and they think they're entitled because they're always winning, and then they don't place and they get very angry. Just be mindful that exists, and as judges too, if you're always selected to be a judge, don't let the halo effect take control of you. And then also don't let the horns effect take control of you, where you, just because you had one negative impression, maybe you judged them at a previous con, they weren't nice to you, maybe they were having a bad day. Don't let that one negative impression define the rest of their judging experience. Do it one instance at a time. So those are things you'll want to be mindful of. And then just don't conform to everything else simply because, well, they judged it this way at this event, so we have to do it this way too, and this way too. No, like Chibi and Amber both mentioned, every event's different. You'll need to adapt, but you should make sure that it's equitable. The one thing that should be consistent is equity. And I think
my one advice
commentary.
What was it, Amber?
Oh, just saying, it is hard. It's hard to like control things when you don't have control. But as a judge, you got to try your best.
My advice that we haven't said yet, that I learned that was my biggest takeaway of learning how to be a judge, is in the nicest way, learn how to shut up. Your contestants only have a very short time to talk, and so it is their job to talk. I have a set of 3 questions that if my contestant isn't talking, or if they're scared, or if they're shy, that I will ask them to open them up to discuss more of their costume. But if I don't have to say anything, that is not my job as a judge. I might ooh and ah and be the auntie going, oh, look how pretty that is. But I will make sure that they are getting the maximum amount of time possible. This is not your place to judge them right now. It is not your place to verbally give them advice right now. It is their time to tell you how much they love their costume. So I always just ask encouraging questions like, what was your favorite piece? What was the best challenge you overcame? What is the one thing you're most proud of? These are the kinds of questions you want to ask to get them to discuss their costume. The only other question might be if they forgot to talk about a hat or a prop that they're going, and then they're like, oh, I think that's it. You can go, oh, well, what about your hat? Because as somebody who always forgets pieces when I'm judging, I love it when judges ask me questions. But that is your job as the judge, is to make sure them talk the entire time, not to have any other feedback yourself. So that's my my one advice that we didn't talk about, is allow them to have their 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever time they have to discuss, and you should just step back and listen.
Yep, I agree. And then I think for me, the one thing that I like that I've started to do and started to expect other judges to do is when we present, I always, as the judge, want to announce the winner. And I always want to tell people why. And specifically, it's in part because of Sam. We had a costume contest where Sam was there in her Thane, which if you guys have not seen her Thane is fucking amazing. She, made the cat suit. She made a silicone headpiece, painted it, did the SFX makeup, everything like that. In that same contest was a giant robot cosplay. And it was like a 10-foot tall robot cosplay with lights.
It was a bumblebee, and he was all like made out of automotive parts. It was crazy.
It was so impressive, but it was just that skeleton, and everything on it was literally just repainted toy parts. Like they were literally just like I was like, oh, that's the front of like this car, et cetera, et cetera. So still impressive, but Sam ended up getting,
and that person also was a professional welder, I think, is what we found out too. Yeah.
So Sam ended up getting best in show, and I ended up getting a lot of people going, why did the bumblebee win? It was so big. I was like, because he showed one thing really well. Sam showed 4 things really well. So I'm going to give it to the person who's showing me more.
Yeah, I got first in advance at that con, and I think it was Liz Todd Studios that got best in show with the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah. Which was
amazing. I love that human.
But yeah,
and that's one thing to keep in mind. I think that's beautiful, Amber. I honestly that's something I've been trying to also add in, because the audience doesn't see what you judged. They don't know how pretty those scenes were or how clean it is.
Yeah. And that way I can say, this person impressed us with this and this and this and this and this. And then the audience is like, oh, okay. We'll shut up. And then I don't hear as much when I give.
Yeah, because when someone comes in and they're like, I'm like, whoa, because like there at Fan Fusion there was an individual that I'm like, wow, that mask is so good. I thought it was purchased, but he's like, no, I made it. Here's the whole process, and you're like, that's like 13 unique skills right there, because there was doll making involved, there was rigging, there was latex, there was so much involved, right? So that is one thing you want to think about. I want to give a shout out to Raul, Cool Gamer, Phantom of Many Topics, Joe, Anthony. Thank you all for watching the stream today. We really appreciate your participation. I'm sorry we didn't get to many of your comments. We had a lot to walk through, and we've had this on our docket for so long that I finally was like, we need to do this. We've had so many requests for this particular stream, and I'm like, I just gotta get it organized. So.
And I hope for people who have never judged, it kind of gives you an eye into what goes on in judging, because I do feel like sometimes the audience is like again with that bumblebee, they're like, well, why didn't the bumblebee win? Obviously it should have won. And I hope this gives you an understanding of what we're actually looking for.
Yeah, and judges, one thing we didn't talk about at judging levels, if someone comes in and they say they are a professional and they do it for their daily job, that will set them at a different scale, right?
Yeah.
So if they're in a master level, but they're professional, they make a living from it, you will have to add even more on top to the questioning and to the scrutiny, because this is their profession. most of the people competing, it's a hobby, right? And this is a professional. So then you have to think about, okay, well, what other elements should we consider since this is what they do day to day? So those
Yeah.
are things you'll also encounter off and on. And more cons are beginning to add what's called a professional category so that individuals and those levels can compete without being worried about, causing kind of
Most of them will
ethics
end up in a
issue.
master's. Like, you will automatically be pushed into masters if you have
Yeah.
an art
Yeah.
field as like a career
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah, and judges are typically harder and scrutinized more if they found out that you are a professional.
Yeah. Like I make
Because they're going to
latex
expect a higher
headpieces.
quality.
So like my latex headpieces better be perfect if I'm competing with them. Like that's what I do. It better be perfect.
So let's go ahead and wrap up. We are going to announce today that starting next month, we'll go back to 4 streams a month, but it's going to be not as long. There's only going to be, most likely, there will only be 2 streams that are an hour long. The rest of them are going to be 15 to 30 minutes. So we're going to have 1 stream a month, the usual, where we're giving you information on cosplay or what's trending and what people have looked for data on and need a little bit more experience on. Then our other one will be, we're going to dress up and we're going to play a random game. I don't know what it's going to be, but we're just going to play a random game and be goofy. The third one is going to be, oh gosh, was that the tutorial one? Now I'm trying to remember everything because I've been documenting everything.
The tutorial one is one.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
the
so.
tutorial one's the shorter one. And then, oh, it's a craft stream. So we're going to have 1 craft stream, 1 game stream, 1 standard hour long, and then we're going to have just a quick tutorial. It might be live or it might be pre-recorded that we release.
Should be
That's
fun.
it.
Should be a good variety.
We're starting to get a few more people who want to come in and host with us. So we're vetting those and looking through those individuals right now. We've had a lot of people move, life circumstance changes. It's been Costalk Live has seen a lot of change in the past year. So we're happy to finally get back into this. Age of Radio is helping with this as well by sponsoring some things and kind of lifting some of the burden off of us. Bye, Chibi. Chibi's phone died. So that was Chibi Raincloud. And then Amber, where can people find you?
I am amberbrightprops.com and I'm Amber Bright Props on literally every social media. So pick your favorite social media. Please, if you're on Instagram, go follow me. I've been at the same like follower count for like 5 years at this point. It's very annoying. But yeah, amberbrightprops.com and I'm everywhere under that name. Oh, welcome back, Chibi.
And Chibi's back. All right, Chibi, where
At
can people
least
find
it
you?
politely waited for the end of the episode.
So where can people find you, Chibi?
Oh, here I am, Chibi Raincloud, Chibi_Raincloud on everything. My email is Outlook or Facebook or Instagram or Cosgear or any of the above. You can find me there. My internet is bad, so I'm sorry, but thank you everybody for hanging out. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about.
And just you can find me thermalcosplay.com, but I'm going to be spending more and more of my time on Cos Talk. I'm going to be dedicating a lot more to that. So you'll probably see me more frequently on Cos Talk Live. And if you want to find us, is costalk-live.com. We'll see you in the future, and we hope you have a wonderful Sunday or Monday, depending where you're at. Bye, everyone.
Wait, what's that? What's that?
Chibi's gone. Chibi, no. I can't.